So thank you all for coming out this evening. I am Dr. Robert Reed II. In my day job, I'm an assistant professor of history at Claflin University in Orangeburg, South Carolina. But also I am heavily involved with the Progressive Network through my work as the lead instructor for the Majeska Simpkins School of Human Rights. Now, I don't want to make it seem as though it's self-explanatory for why we're here this evening. Of course, we all had a myriad of responses to the election a couple of weeks ago. Most of those responses can be summed up in four-letter words, but a lot of sadness, a lot of anger, a lot of outrage. But I think now we are ready for a lot of action. But we wanted to have a gathering this evening of folks who are deeply concerned not just about the election and its results, but are also deeply concerned about the direction of the country and the world as we currently live in it. Of course, 2024 has been a difficult year in so many respects. There are various conflicts going on around the globe right now. The country itself is, as always, deeply divided. But what we want to provide here this afternoon is an opportunity for all of us to think and to reflect and hopefully plan some action after our thinking and reflection. Now, last week I wrote a very short piece thinking about what has happened in the last month or so, where I cited two of my personal heroes, Frederick Douglass and W.E.B. Du Bois. Both of these gentlemen lived during other perilous times in American and world history. Both of these gentlemen had to confront almost insurmountable odds in terms of building protest movements and a legacy of activism at the same time. And I thought that both of these men provided some ways of thinking about what's going on in the here and now. Anyway, with Douglass, we know him best as an orator, as an abolitionist, but what we forget is that he lived another 30 years after the end of the American Civil War. And so he was alive long enough to see the rise and fall of Reconstruction and the beginnings of Jim Crow segregation. One of his last major addresses was known as the Lessons of the Hour, which he gave in 1894, where Douglass basically said, we've accomplished a great deal as a people, but these things are all being pushed back at rapid pace. Douglass would actually die in 1895, the same year as this state's constitutional convention went into effect, which limited the voting rights of many African Americans and also white Americans as well. And so Douglass was able to see the triumph of the Civil War, the destruction of slavery, the victory of Black voting rights, and then he lived a bit longer to see the defeat of those same voting rights. You fast forward about 50 years later to W.E.B. Du Bois, legendary scholar, orator, writer, who in 1946 gave a speech titled Behold the Land right here in Columbia, South Carolina at the Township Auditorium. It was part of the Southern Negro Youth Convention's annual conference, an organization that is often forgotten about and left out of most history texts because of both its radicalism and also its vision for a different, better, fairer South nation and world. But in that Behold the Land speech, and this is, I think, why we're here this evening, Dr. Du Bois made it very clear that the fight for freedom, the fight against tyranny, included a battle line, a firing line, right here in the state of South Carolina. Now, I don't know about the rest of you guys in this room this evening, but I have to admit I've grown a bit exhausted with some of our so-called friends and allies throughout the country who have sworn off the entire South, who have said, well, because those are red states, all the folks there are at blame or at fault what happened with this year's election. Never mind that Donald Trump is from the state of New York, something I bring up to my New Yorker friends all the time. But what I want to make clear is that we here in South Carolina do have a role to play. Sometimes it feels as though working and living in this state means that you have to put up with a lot of BS and get very little in return. But with my work with the Majeska Simpkins School over the last few years, I've been able to communicate to students, many of whom are involved in activism, all of whom are concerned citizens, the idea that South Carolina is not just some conservative rib rock Republican hinterland. Instead, South Carolina is a place filled with good and decent men and women, many of whom are trying to make a difference day to day to day. I know right now for a lot of us, it doesn't feel like we've made much of a difference at all. But the real driving force behind activism is understanding that we are not just fighting for ourselves. We are not just fighting for our friends, our families, our neighbors, our loved ones. We are fighting for folks who are not yet even born. And we're fighting for their children and their children as well. This was going to be a long and difficult struggle, regardless of who won a couple of weeks ago. I will admit, though, that it would have been a bit better if it was President Kamala Harris versus having round two of Donald Trump. But we all understand that the work that needs to be done begins with these kinds of gatherings, with the kinds of conversations with folk in places like this who are deeply dedicated to making South Carolina, the United States, and the world a much better place to live in. I am 38 years old. I told my students at Claflin a couple of weeks ago, day after the election, and because they were incredibly disconsolate, they were incredibly depressed and scared. I told them that as students at Claflin, they are part of a heritage of students who have seen both some of the worst this nation has to offer and some of the best this nation has to offer. Just yesterday, I happened to lecture about the Orangeburg Massacre, which in my classroom at Claflin happened literally a couple of blocks away from where I teach. But I told the students a couple of weeks ago that it's very easy to lose hope. It's very easy to fall into despair. I understand that. My first election was 2004. Yeah, enough said. Yeah, you're laughing. That was my first election, got the vote in. I did not vote for the guy who won in 2004, George W. Bush. Yeah, I know, exactly. But what I pointed out to my students as well is that this is precisely the time when the kind of hard work we need to make the world a better place actually gets underway. So we are here this evening to reaffirm our humanity in ourselves and each other. We are here this evening to remind ourselves that the fight is not yet over. It has only just begun. And we are also here this evening to commiserate, to talk, to have some good food, to have some comradeship. Because if we're being honest with ourselves too, one of the main problems in our society right now is that we're all so heavily isolated, siloed with one another. But gatherings like this still matter. Gatherings like this are important because we remind ourselves that actually we are not alone. Actually, we are not on our own. We have communities that we can fall back on. We have communities we can help build starting this evening. And it is my hope that today's event will be the start of some new conversations, some new gatherings, and most importantly, some new ideas about action that we can take on our own, and more importantly, we can take collectively. Because this struggle should not be a lonely one. This struggle should be one of solidarity and support for one another. So I believe that is why we are here this evening, but I'm not here to lecture you guys. We're not here to lecture to you or talk at you. We're here to have some conversations this evening, all right? So rest assured, this will not be like one of my classes at Claflin. You were spared that at least. I want to very quickly talk about what we actually do here. And if others in our organization want to chime in, you're certainly welcome to do so. I mentioned before that I am the lead instructor of the Majeska Simpkins School of Human Rights for the South Carolina Progressive Network. You are actually here in the Grow building, the Grassroots Organizing Workshop building, which was the forerunner to the Progressive Network. GROW was founded in the 1970s. It provided a template for grassroots organizing, not just in this state, but throughout the country. Actually, many of the posters you see around the room are actually posters from activities and events GROW was involved in the 1970s, 80s, and early 1990s. In case you aren't aware, activism did not stop in the 1960s. It actually continued on. As you can see, many of these posters, again, indicating the kind of work we're doing, are from previous movements, but they're about things that are still of concern to us in 2024. For example, I cannot help but note the poster back there about Palestine, which is, of course, very relevant right now. You have other posters here about the use of nuclear energy, about nuclear war. That's actually not quite gone away if you look at the news recently. So again, there is a lot of work that we're still doing. The Progressive Network itself was founded in 1996 as a way to really help push progressive movements along during a time period in the 1990s where the Republican Party and the right wing was really on the ascendancy in this state and throughout the country. Of course, the Majeska Simpkins School is just one of many projects and programs the Progressive Network has been involved in or is currently involved in. I have been lead instructor since 2019. The school itself has been around since 2015. Next year will be our 10th anniversary. And the Progressive Network's Majeska Simpkins School of Human Rights, named after Majeska Simpkins, legendary human rights champion from right here in South Carolina, is basically what you would refer to as a freedom or citizenship school. During the civil rights movement, many such schools were formed in states like Mississippi, Alabama, South Carolina. Dr. Du Bois himself was actually involved in a freedom school in Harlem in the 1950s when he was blacklisted by the federal government. Simpkins herself actually created a freedom school here in the 1940s, which Brett actually found out a couple years ago. And funny enough, the curriculum that she used back then is very similar to the one we use now. The Majeska Simpkins School is in part about teaching history. It is a people's history of South Carolina. If you know anything about Howard Zinn, this idea of people's history of America, we're taking it to a smaller state level where our state's history is not just about fine fellows like John C. Calhoun or Ben Tillman or Strom Thurmond, what I like to refer to as the Palmetto Legion of Doom. But it's also about folks like Robert Smalls or Septima Clark, or the rebels of the Stono Rebellion, or Jessica Simpkins herself, and so many other men and women who are often either left out or downplayed in the textbooks of South Carolina and the general histories of the Palmetto State. Now, as a historian, that's the part that I am often concerned with, is teaching this history, but it's not just a course about history. It's also a course about action. We often call on students in the Majeska Simpkins School to get involved in a variety of projects and programs in the Progressive Network. We also urge students, even if they're not going to get involved in activism, at the very least to continue to be concerned and engaged citizens, because as we have seen with recent elections, many of our fellow citizens are concerned, but they aren't engaged. And that's really part of the problem. If we can engage more folks and get them more attuned to not just national, but more importantly, state and local politics, then we can achieve a great deal of things. But the Majeska Simpkins School answers a question many academics hate answering. So what? Why learn this history? What does it matter if I know about Majeska Simpkins or Robert Smalls or the 1868 Constitution or the Orangeburg Massacre? Why do these things matter? Well, I'll give you an example. I mentioned to my students yesterday the Orangeburg Massacre and talked about it in depth. Most folks learn about it in this state of South Carolina, learn about it as though it's some sort of local event, that it happened in Orangeburg, the pain is only in Orangeburg, and that's it. Yesterday, I showed my students photographs of protests about the Orangeburg Massacre in New York, in Chicago, mention of it in international press in 1968. Dr. King's telegram to President Johnson about the massacre, so on and so forth. And most importantly, perhaps, I showed my students an image from a magazine called Freedom Waves, which was a magazine of the Black left in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, where in spring 1968, they had an issue that was originally dedicated to Dr. Du Bois on what would have been his 100th birthday. But it turned to a tribute to Martin Luther King Jr., who'd been killed just before the issue went to press. But when you open the magazine, the first thing you see is a Dr. King tribute. The next page is titled In Memoriam to the Martyrs and includes the names of not only the 3 young men who were killed in Orangeburg, but side by side with 5 young men who were murdered in Rhodesia by that regime's white supremacist government. So, in short, what the Majeska Simpkins School gets across is that the lessons from the past can help guide us in thinking about what we can do in the here and now and what we can do for the future. And perhaps most importantly, it also tells us that South Carolina is a hell of a lot more than the politicians we just happen to send to Washington, D.C., or the folks who just happen to lead us in Columbia. South Carolina is a place that is filled with a lot of great people. And when I talk to my students at Claflin or the folks in the Majeska Simpkins School or just talking to folks on the streets here in Columbia or Orangeburg, what I get is that we have a lot of decent, kind, well-meaning people here who are fired up and ready to do something to change the conditions in this state. It's not impossible. It has been done before. It can be done again. All we need is your help and your support.
Thank you, Dr. Green. Hi, everyone. Hey, oh my God. A lot of familiar faces, some I don't know. Hi, everyone. Say hello.
Hey, Josh. Josh.
Like Dr. Green said, this is not a time that we want to talk at you. This is a time that we want y'all to talk with each other and start building some of these communal bonds that are going to see us through the next 4 years. Because y'all know this. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. Fascism thrives on isolation, and we don't have the answers. But collectively, we do have the answers. Y'all, unfortunately, I teach University 101, and this is going to be very structured in that way. On your tabletops, you see some icebreaker questions. They're not really icebreakers; they're actually pretty heavy hitters. But what I'm going to ask is, I'm looking around, and a lot of you have very naturally clumped with your friends and with the people that you know. So I'm going to do another very University 101 thing. I'm going to ask some of y'all to go sit with some people you don't know, build some new community, and then we're going to answer some of these questions. People in Zoom land, we're going to split y'all out into breakout groups as well. I turned my head to y'all, but now you're just seeing the back of my, hey, Mike. We're gonna split y'all into breakout groups, and we have some questions for y'all. The questions are on the table, but I'm going to read them out loud. And Gabby, I'm going to have you send them in the Zoom chat just so everyone has those. The questions are, what brought you here tonight? And whether that is the immediate things that brought you here or the larger story that puts you in this room right now, I think we want to know that, and we want you to share that. What issues are you interested in? What organizations, if you are a part of them, what are you a part of? What do you care about? What are the issues that are keeping you up at night? What are your biggest concerns post-election? And then finally, because this isn't a gripe fest, y'all, this is building solutions. What do you have and hope to contribute to your community, whether that is, on the city level, on the state level, on the nation level, whatever that might be, or your friends, whatever it might be, what do you hope to contribute to your community? So we're going to give you all about 15 or maybe 20 minutes to build some connections, sit with some people you don't know, make some friends. If y'all need a little sheet with questions on them, let me know and I'll bring you one. Thank you. Okay. I hope so. Thank y'all for taking that time to talk and to get to know each other, and especially for getting to know people that you might not have otherwise talked to. So we've had a chance to talk in smaller groups, but I do want to open up the space for us to share out to the larger group. And so I think one of the things, I'm just going to leave it very open, because I think a lot of y'all's ideas are already flowing from those conversations, but I want to invite for anyone to share concerns that you might have, issues that you're kind of currently facing in your community or that you are looking towards in your community. And then, as we're sharing these things, if y'all are involved in organizations or groups or just you yourself are doing this work that people are concerned about, that's also an opportunity for y'all to share and make those connections. And we have a lot of people in this room who are already doing really great work and a lot of people looking to be connected to that work as well. So I'm going to bounce back and forth between the room and our digital friends. And we're going to start. Let's start with our Zoom folks. And so if y'all just want to raise your hands via the Zoom feature, and if you can't do that, raise your physical hands. And if y'all have anything you want to share out, I'll give y'all a second to do that. I know Mama G's got something. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Okay. Well, that's what we need. But I'll also open it up. So I'm not putting all our Zoom folks just on the spot. I'll put it open up on the to the room if you want to share anything. And you can raise your hand or you can just talk out if you want to.
Okay, I don't have a problem with going out there and running, screaming, hollering. I thank everybody for being here. I thank you, Becky, especially for inviting me. What's up, Brett? We are the Rich program and we serve street level associations. We work with the babies behind the wall. So that's what I'm saying. Thank you to Brother Tom Summers, who I had the chance to meet and interact with. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mama G. Yes, and I can't see names right now, so sorry.
Tom, you're muted.
Tom. James.
Hey, it's James.
We'll get James. Hey, James.
You guys hear me? I can talk just a little bit about our group. We had several folks in the room and I won't try to name all the names because I'll forget. But I just wanted to put out some of the concerns that came up, which were about queer families, about people not being represented politically in South Carolina, about capitalism being a problem, about the safety of non-white people in our state. We talked about what we could contribute and some ideas came up, things like writing a newspaper or canvassing for a candidate for office or doing the back end work of arranging a meeting room when your local organization needs something to go on. And that was kind of helpful. We came out with two big questions though that I want to make sure get on the board. One was, how do we get people more engaged? That's the first one. And then the other one was like, does coming to Columbia and helping with direct activism really help? So those are two questions that came out of our group.
Okay, yeah. Gabby wants to respond to that.
Hey, James. So I've actually been working with the ACLU on some anti-censorship work. And one of the things that we've been doing is talking about how we can how important it is for the Midlands especially to show up to state legislation. State legislation opens in January, but also to your local community board meetings, city councils, because we have people coming from Beaufort and York County and Anderson, and they're coming and showing up, and Columbia citizens aren't, because there is the assumption that we are a blue area. And so what we really need is people to show up. And we have so many resources to teach you how to show up to the event, to speak out at these city council meetings. We also have a lot of resources on getting a group of 5 people together and literally making an appointment to go speak to your legislator and get an answer from them on whether or not they are going to support or not support upcoming legislation in the House and in the state. So if anyone is interested in doing that, you can always reach out to me at gabby@scpronet.com. I'm happy to pass on those resources. But to answer your question, generally, yes, coming to Columbia and showing up, just being in the room is incredibly important. And it does make a difference.
And also too, I think I just want to add that what that makes me think of is how this is a long haul work, and martyrdom and not taking care of ourselves does nothing to sustain lifelong work of movement building. So, and if that means raising little birds, so be it, whatever.
Can I add just? something?
Yes, David.
One other thing that I wanted to just, the groups that I've been working with, of course, is like learning from Progressive Network over here, and the history really did help to realize, like I mentioned, it's a long haul. There's a couple of other things that I'm working with is Carolina Peace Resource Center, and then American Friends Service Committee, or FCNL, Friends Committee for National Legislation, which does a lot of advocacy work right now. And one thing that I would like to raise awareness, and I'm sure we already know this, but the fact that things are happening right now, like it's not 2 months from now that things are gonna get terrible. Like literally tonight, there are votes that are happening while votes are happening, there are hospitals being bombed and such. And so holding our elected officials accountable, also raising the education and realizing that these struggles are all connected, because those drones that are over there are also coming to the upstate, and they're also,
Yes.
there are police.
Yes.
So it's all connected and it's happening right now, so hold people accountable.
Hey, but how would people get connected with Carolina Peace and other things?
Carolina Peace, the third Tuesday of every month, they have a like a house at our education night teach-ins over here at the Grove. You can go to Carolina Peace Resource Center's site. Another really good thing I would encourage folks, just as I'm trying to learn, is afsc.org. They have every Friday at noon an action hour where they actually have somebody who's from Gaza, who's talking about what's happening on the West Bank, and they've been there for like the last 70-something years. So they've been doing like human rights work and advocacy work there, and you'll get to see like week to week what is happening. So it's a good way to find action.
Yeah. So we will send out these resources and make sure everyone knows how to get connected as well. Yes.
I wanted to add something. It's more like just general reminder. And I was screaming this at my friends because, for a second, with pretty much a Republican trifecta guaranteed, you might feel it's not worth calling your senators and your representatives. It is still absolutely worth it. You kind of have to spin it a certain way, though. What I've learned is that you always have to push money when talking about issues. Like, this is the financial loss at work, and you'll see backlash from your lobbyists and business owners in your state. You kind of have to toy with their emotions a little bit because they do not give a fuck about you. And money is always the bottom line. That's what they care about. Also, none of the cabinets have been guaranteed yet or confirmed, so you can still push that because ain't no fucking way I'm gonna have RFKJ, whatever the fuck's name is, telling me what is it? No way. So,
Yeah. Thank
I
you.
just asked.
No, thank you. Thank you. And yeah, I would also, not ever have to look at RFK Jr. Yeah.
So obviously I know with the group of people that are in this room right now, a lot of us have a lot of the same values and things that we care about, and we're probably here for a lot of the same reasons. One of the things that I think is really important to constantly, to even be able to do this kind of work and have like a meaningful impact on like the people in our community and broader community, is to really like try to battle or address some of the privileges that we all have. And I know that is always like a tough thing to actually come to terms with, but in reality, like all of us in this room have a bunch of identities that when we think of what makes us, we cling to those identities, but there's also the fact that there are identities of us that people see first and perceive first. And so remembering that, yes, like for instance, when I think of myself, Black is first. There's also, I'm non-binary. But when I go in any spaces, like the first thing I'm going to be perceived as is like a Black man. And so being a man, I'm going to have the privileges of being perceived as a man before anything, but also being Black, that's going to also affect the way that I'm treated. And so thinking about the way not only ourselves, but others around us, how they're perceived, despite obviously our identities are really important to us, but thinking about the work that we do and that we're interested in can't only be serving our chosen identities.
Yeah.
It needs to be serving everyone else's too. And so really being more intersectional and like some of the things that we're thinking about and like, sure, this thing is not going to directly affect me, but it's gonna affect the people that I care about. And just really thinking about these two different things of like how people are perceived versus how they identify with, and also thinking about doing things that don't necessarily like the whole point of this is to care about human rights and all that stuff. And so we shouldn't just be only exclusive in what we choose to fight for. So, yeah.
Yes, thank you, here, yes.
So, I was a former Starbucks Workers United organizer, and at the end of the month, as we speak, 500 partners from across the country will be sitting across the table from Starbucks executives to negotiate their pay, benefits, stuff like that. And that only happened because of collective action that happened independent of, an outside entity. And, we are the Democratic Socialists of America, the Columbia chapter, and we are mostly involved with feeding the unhoused outside the library. And when working people realize that, we are really no different than the same people who don't have a home and can't afford to eat. Whenever we get the three facets, so to speak, of the working class, all realizing that we're under the same thing and form an independent worker-led movement that is truly by the people, then we'll have more power than you could ever expect. And then with the people who run the world and make the world run, will be the ones running the world.
Yeah, here. And I want to shout out all the wonderful people in this room who are doing mutual aid work. And there's a lot of you, and I recognize you, and I see the work that y'all are doing. And I truly believe. And also, if anybody wants to share out the work that y'all are doing and how people can get involved, I want to remind people that this is a space for that. Yeah.
One more thing, sorry. On the left, we work pretty siloed and we don't seem to work together a lot. And the ruling class is so powerful because they have structural organizational strength. The people that are in power don't personally care about what's going on. And we have the exact opposite problem. We seem to work siloed and separately. But, all the orgs are in this room and all the orgs that have organized around Palestine. If we all actually like consistently work together, and we can pool our resources together, imagine what we can do then.
Here. All right, we've been ignoring our Zoom folks. Any contributions around the state?
I don't think that anyone, believe me, everyone in this room is dedicated, so no one is, I'm not gonna say we're ignoring, but there's some really hot topics that I'm not gonna deal with right now that are coming up. And one of them is child support in relation to our young fathers, who have jobs, don't have jobs, can't make it, the court system. I'm gonna put it out there. A lot of them are incarcerated due to that, but I'm gonna leave that alone. Somebody, how about my new warrior friend Tom? Would you like to come and talk about something that's a hot topic, because that's mine. A lot of children don't get to ever meet their fathers because of a lot of constitutional situations. And I'm done.
I don't believe you're done, Monty. And I know that perspective comes from being in the midst and really doing the work, and I appreciate you so much. Tom, you got put on the spot, Tom, but I think you're on the spot.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
We can.
Okay, good. I turned 90 years of age about a month ago, and so I'm not able to get out like I used to. I think I joined the Progressive Network the first day that it was developed at the Penn Center under Brett Burse's leadership. And I've been a part of the Progressive Network kind of since then, even though I'm just kind of barely hanging on now. And times like this, I think it's so rich to have an opportunity to people to share what concerns they have about this recent presidential election, what that means for the state of South Carolina. And as Mama G has pointed out, there's so many things on as far as missing people and social services not connecting up with people. And I've spent my major time of vocation in the South Carolina Department of Mental Health as a chaplain and a director of clinical pastoral education. So we were right aware of what happened in the 1980s, early 1980s, when so many mental patients were released from these mammoth hospitals across the country. And there were very little social systems developed to take care of that, and it's overwhelming. And therefore you have a lot of persons with mental illness out on the streets as homeless people. So that the work, the vocational work really never quits. I mean, it goes on, and these recent appointees that our now President-elect Trump is making is so faulty, that those appointments are so faulty and so hurtful. But no, I don't know how it's going to affect South Carolina, but I think we're in for a major, major overhaul and battle for these things. Those are just some of my comments. And I enjoyed talking with Mama G so much.
Mhm.
Thank you, John. Yes, Nicole.
Hi, okay, so the first thing I wanted to bring up is I wanted to double down, someone over here talked about how money makes Republicans actually think. Yeah, right, yeah. It's so true. Like that's, Cover SC is currently using that argument to try to get Medicaid expansion, which would help so many people. But they're using money and they're using the North Carolina example to show just how much that can impact your wallet, essentially, because when more people work, you get more money in the economy, and it's good for everybody. You know, it also is good for people though. But that's arguments. The other thing I wanted to talk about real quick is something else that I use money for as a means of advocacy. And that is instant runoff voting, also known as ranked choice voting. I run Better Ballot South Carolina, and this is one of the things that we can actually make a little bit of headway on because it's technically a nonpartisan issue. And it's something that can change the makeup of our elected officials so that it's more representative of us. It's something that we can do, and we can, in theory, get through the legislature using that money argument, because what I want is equal representation. I want third parties to have a chance. And that is what it allows, but it also saves us the cost of runoffs. And that's what I talk to Republicans about. Just some numbers, City of Columbia spent $100,000 on their last municipal runoff. Charleston, same. Smaller municipalities that have less effort or less money to spend like $5,000-10,000 on their runoffs. But like, you know, at a municipal level, who has that kind of money? But again, I want it to improve our democracy so that we are better represented by our elected officials. And because session is just going to be kicking up in January, we're getting to our busiest time of the year. We have an organizing meeting at the beginning of December. Then we have a rally and lobbying day at the State House at the end of January. And followed by a nice bit of fellowship as well. And I hope people will come. BetterBallotSouthCarolina.org. I'm sorry, BetterBallotSC.org is the website. And you can learn more there about this. Oh, just as an example, Alaska uses this right now. And Alaska's state legislature basically pushed out their Freedom Caucus, and the Democrats and Republicans built a coalition where they actually got things done. So it just promotes good government and equal representation.
Yeah, you're here. I want to open up the space before we start to wrap up. And by wrap up, I mean really just get started, right? Because this is just the opportunity for us to get in a room together to make some friends. Are there any other people doing work in organizations that it would be helpful for y'all to be in a room with like-minded people and share out? Yes.
Yeah, so like, I'm hearing like so many different concerns and issues, obviously, that everybody has their own things. But I think the answer, at least as far as I can see, is the same. It's mutual aid community organizing. We have to be able to take care of ourselves because the politicians and governments will not do it. They will fuck us over every time. They will sell us out, especially as a queer person, especially as a trans person. They will sell me out every single time. So what does that mean? It means if I get cut off from my hormones, I know that I can turn to my friends in my community and get DIY estrogen. If I need to have an abortion, I know that I can get a friend to drive me across state lines to have an abortion. We can look out for one another. When my job fires me, I can get help from a friend who can provide me with a meal and clothing and housing. We have to be able to build these alternative structures to take care of one another. We don't control who's in the government. We really don't. We don't control what they do. Very limited power there. But I know I can go to my neighbor and I can look out for them. I know that, I'm with DSA Columbia. I know I can go down to the library 3 times a week and help feed and clothe and get bus passes to unhoused people. And I know at some level that they'll look out for me when I need help, I think that's kind of our avenue forward. And I hope y'all will look into joining the DSA chapter or the Columbia chapter of DSA.
How is it?
Do you have the QR code?
Yeah, we have a QR code that I can meet people at the door for, DSA-Columbia.org.
Can you say that again, please?
DSA-Columbia.org, or I have a QR code that I can pass around on my phone that people can scan.
And what I will say to that end, and why I like highlighting our mutual aid folks is that like providing these pie in the sky political solutions when we're not showing up for people's needs, it doesn't sit right with me. I'm sure it doesn't sit right with all of y'all. And as we kind of wrap up, and I'm going to give it away to Dr. Green in a second to kind of take us home in a way that I certainly cannot. What I don't even intend to. I want to talk about this space and what this space can mean for us as we organize, because I want to be friends with all of y'all, and this is hard work, and I want to listen to music with y'all and enjoy art with y'all and experience joy with y'all for this long struggle. And so in the months ahead and I've this space has been a place for coming together, not just for organizing, but for building that beloved community. And I hope to do more of that. And we have index cards in the back. I think, yes, we have index cards in the back so that we can hear from y'all what would be how this space can be of service to not just the work that you're doing, but to our common humanity and what's actually driving y'all and keeping y'all sustained. I want to thank y'all for one. Yes, Amanda.
One thing to add to kind of what you were saying and what Josh is saying is you're going to have a lot of people when you use the word socialism, when you use the word progressive, that are immediately going to resist what you have to say, and they're not going to want to hear it. You use the word anarchist, they're not going to want to hear it. Some people, I mean, they're going to shut you down. So I think also you're gonna have so many people who don't want to get involved in anything partisan. They're not gonna want to get involved in anything political, even though existing at this point is starting to feel a little political. But I think encouraging people to go out and get involved in their community beyond just the Progressive Network or the DSA or anybody who's doing work right now. So getting out and getting involved at Harvest Hope, the Women's Shelter, Mercy, anything that's going to help your community, because there are so many people within our community as well who aren't even thinking about what we're thinking about right now because they're just trying to survive. And while we're doing the same thing, it is completely different for them. So a really easy, non-political way to bring people in very covertly is just encouraging as many people as you can to start getting involved in your community, helping with, houseless people, helping with people who need food, people with mental health problems. All of those things are going to be beneficial, but are not going to make people feel like they're involved in anything political until they start to think about it from that perspective. So just something else to keep in mind that I've been thinking a lot about over the last week or two.
And while we're at it, I want to add something to that, which is on my mind a lot, which is I know we got some country people in this room, and bridging the urban rural divide and building these communities outside of just Columbia, South Carolina, because I love my country folk. And then yes, my friend.
Yeah. So good evening, everyone. My name is Wayne Borders. There are other people in this room who can tell you a lot about my longevity, but this is the time for recruitment. Everyone in this room is enlisted. Anyone in this room who thinks of themselves as a white person, you have more work to do than everybody else. Because this is the opportunity for you to step into anti-racism. This is the opportunity for you to reach beyond Columbia, beyond Lexington. Yes, we absolutely need people in these rural areas because they are the same people voting against their own interests. I will also say, do not be worried about the people at the national level because they don't care about you. We don't have time. If anything, elections will absolutely continue to matter, especially in the midterms. So please continue to stay involved, both with your legislators at the national level, but here in Columbia.
Yeah.
And I will happily give everybody the number to the federal congressional switchboard, because yes, those people need to hear from us all the time, especially because they are Republican. But even if you live in Columbia, the Democrats here need you to stay on their ass because they clearly have no value. That's why they got wiped out. I'm someone who ran for office in Lexington County. I earned plus like 1,000 more votes than the Democrat who did last time.
Oh, wow.
The Republican also earned 1,000 more votes than he did in 2016. But he still lost 2 percentage points and I won 6. Elections are not about moving shit forward. It's about gaining inches over the long term. So yes, this is a long game. Be prepared. You need community. The people in this room are it to start, but there's more. And you're absolutely right. People need to get more involved with the other organizations and issues that they care about. Because yes, while they might be terrified of socialism, they're getting fucked over by socialism of these fucking billionaires, these lobbyists, and all these consultant fucks who clearly have no idea who the hell any of you are. And they're never gonna come talk to you. So, I'll be here. If you guys need some advisement in reviving the New Legacy Project, I'm an original member. I'm a founding member. I will happily come help you. But stay busy, because it's going to keep getting busy, and start making phone calls now.
You're here. All right. That's a good way to end it.
And for God's sake, y'all, please do not go to the march in January. We've already marched, already done that. So please don't do it.
All right, so I'm gonna, after you or before you, I don't know. I'll go first. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up this evening. We're gonna hear from Brett as well. But again, I want to thank everyone for coming out this evening. This isn't the very end. We want to Make sure you guys can mix and mingle, enjoy some refreshment, enjoy each other's company. But I think this has been a really powerful evening. Again, it's always important to be reminded that we are not alone. That all of us here have something to contribute to this, what some would call a great crusade. And to that end, before I bring Brett up here, I want to actually read something from Dr. Du Bois's Behold the Land speech, because I think if you have a chance this week or next, look up his speech, Behold the Land. I think it's one of the greatest essays / speeches he ever wrote or gave, that often kind of gets downplayed because he did it in the Cold War era when most folks were, again, back to your point, not wanting to hear anything about socialism or even social democracy or progress or progressivism. So at the end of his speech, imagine you're in a township auditorium in 1946. Imagine that you are surrounded by folks from South Carolina, from Georgia, North Carolina, throughout the country and around the world. You are there with men and women who are in their teens, their 20s, their early 30s. They're progressives, they're socialists, they're communists, they're anarchists, they're fellow travelers. They're men and women who quite simply actually care about the world around them. Imagine that. And imagine you're in the township auditorium rather a year after World War II just ended. And yet there is already talk of potential war with the Soviet Union abroad. And at the same time, you're hearing reports about Black folk being lynched across the South, left and right. Some of them being lynched in their military uniforms, just returning home from fighting fascism and imperialism abroad. That is the atmosphere into which Dr. Du Bois walked into in October of 1946. And this is what he said at the end of his speech. To rescue this land in this way calls for the great sacrifice. This is the thing that you are called upon to do because it is the right thing to do. Because you are embarked upon a great and holy crusade, the emancipation of mankind, Black and white, the upbuilding of democracy, the breaking down, particularly here in the South, of forces of evil represented by race prejudice in South Carolina, by lynching in Georgia, by disenfranchisement in Mississippi, by ignorance in Louisiana, and by all these in monopoly of wealth in the whole South. There could be no more splendid vocation beckoning to the youth of the 20th century, after the flat failures of white civilization, after the flamboyant establishment of an industrial system which creates poverty and the children of poverty, which are ignorance and disease and crime. After the crazy boasting of a white culture that finally ended in wars which ruined civilization in the whole world, in the midst of allied peoples who have yelled about democracy and never practiced it either in the British Empire or in the American Commonwealth or in South Carolina. Here is the chance for young women and young men of devotion to lift again the banner of humanity and to walk toward a civilization which will be free and intelligent, which will be healthy and unafraid, and build in the world a culture led by Black folk and joined by peoples of all colors and all races, without poverty, ignorance, and disease. If Dr. Du Bois could talk about that in 1946, as God is my witness, we can talk about this in 2024. These are not pie in the sky ideas. This is what our lives should be like right now in South Carolina. So again, thank you for coming out. Thank you for having fellowship with us. And now I want to bring up Brett Burson.
We're so lucky to have Dr. Green. You want to be an upwardly mobile academic, you do not have positions like Dr. Green has. We've got him. We've got him. But I wanted to talk about my revolution and when I figured out where the front was. I'm the front. If I can't live my values, I'm losing. And so we're trying to create here organizing not around politics, not around parties, not around candidates, but around shared values. And that's what this horrible disease called materialism that's been organized into capitalism, and they've actually turned it into a form of government, is just destroying. And they will continue to do that. I do believe they have Plan B on Mars, and I hope they all leave soon, because they're going to take this place down. But Majeska, I had the opportunity and horrible responsibility of being her, I like to say left-hand person. for the last 20 years of her life. I've spent more time in her house next door than anybody alive now. We were ideological comrades when we met in 1974. And one of the things that became apparent to me retrospectively is we were both doing the same thing. People ask her, she was born in 1899. She was, I think, 15 years old when the guy in that, Robert Smalls, the big Civil War hero, she was 15 when Robert Smalls died. And I spent all this time with her. That was one generation away from the Civil War. This is an ancient history. They don't want to lift it up. And so that's what we do in the Majestic School. We speak truth to power. It's a really important thing. But when Majestic was asked, how do you keep doing this decade after decade? And she said, well, I guess I'm just selfish because it makes me feel good. And if you can't have fun doing it, you're doing something wrong. Because you are the only front that you can guarantee that you can liberate. You can. And so I want to recognize some people. Becky Robbins, where's Becky Robbins?
Behind you. The
Oh! Just sneaks up on me all the time. And Becky's only been with me for 34 years. She got involved at Grow when she wrote a story when she was working for the Bar Association of lawyers. She had 6,000 lawyers for bosses. About South Carolina being the only state in the nation that didn't allow anonymous testing for AIDS. They wouldn't run it in the newsletter she was working on. Because they also were afraid, as the legislature was, of the Christian Coalition. And so she stormed down to Grow. We had a statewide newspaper, and she asked if we would run it, and she checked in, and still hasn't left.
Be careful, y'all. Seriously.
But we really want to see something here. I'm 76 now. My Peter Pan dust is wearing off, and I've been trying to do everything, and I can't do anything well if I try and do everything. And so I'm stepping back from the boots on the ground, what we call the forward-facing work, the C4 work, the political stuff, going and sitting in the lobbies. I encourage everyone to do that. We have to have as good an inside game as we have an outside game. And we have an inside game, not because we want to take over the Democratic Party, or we want to take over the governance. We want to take over the people that are looking to the Democratic Party and other elements like that for leadership, and they're not getting it. So we don't want the institution, we want the people. And we want the people to share values that we organize around. And so that is what we're committed to doing here in this building, is organizing what Martin Luther King. A year before he was killed, in Riverside Church, he gave a speech that if you read it and don't cry, you're fired. And he said in there that the triplets, I'm summarizing, the triplets of war, racism, poverty are that which it is we have to fight. And he called for a radical revolution of values. And so you must, you don't have to be, but I'm guaranteeing you that if you're not looking for a radical revolution of values, you're on the wrong team. Joe Biden, who is not living his values, he said, show me your budget and I'll show you your values. Well, Joe's budget's wrong and so are his values. Because he's a straight man, let's say we like him, he's a good guy, in a crooked office. The politics of America have been hijacked by the same people George Washington warned us about when he said, do not create parties. You will end up with two that are populated by people that are avarice and egotistical for their own good. Jefferson warned us against corporations. Now we have the worst case scenario. Corporations own the government. And so we've got to fall back, dig in for the long haul, have a good time, and raise hell in all circles. And so if you haven't signed up on our mailing list, there's one back there on that table, and one to lift up the books that Becky has written for the school. And that you cannot fix today unless you understand who made the rules you're living under. When they were made, who benefited from them when they were made, and who benefits from them now. And I'll guarantee you, it ain't the people. So I want to thank everybody for coming. You don't gotta leave, the bar's open. Stay in touch. Okay.